Hello everyone. Welcome to EduTap's another insightful session of Perspective 360 degree, where we do current affair based answer writing practice in a detailed and structured manner. So if you are an aspirant preparing for exams like RBI, NABARD, etc., then this initiative is definitely going to help you with answer writing practice for the descriptive paper of phase 2. So let us begin with the discussion, and the topic that we have chosen for today is the International Monetary Fund, which is IMF, and we are going to discuss it in a detailed manner, covering its various aspects. So before doing that, let us understand the context of this topic, why it was there in the news. So as per the news, the IMF has reached staff level agreement with Pakistan on final $3 bailout review. Now what does it mean? So the background of this news is that last year Pakistan asked for $3 billion from IMF, and out of this $3 billion, $1.9 billion has already been disbursed by the IMF to Pakistan. Now the left amount is $1.1 billion, and this news is regarding this $1.1 billion that has reached the staff level agreement with Pakistan on final $3 billion bailout review. Now what is staff level agreement? So staff level agreement is nothing but it is the preliminary agreement that is between the country's government and the IMF staff regarding the terms and conditions of the proposed financial program. So basically it is not the final step of the process. Once the staff level agreement has reached, after that the IMF executive board, they will take the final decision. So I hope this is clear to you. Now what do we mean by the bailout review? So the bailout review is nothing but in the bailout review, the representatives of lending institute, what this representative of lending institute will do in this case, these representatives will be of the IMF, because IMF is a lending institute. What they will do, they will go to the recipient country. The recipient country is one who is availing the loan, so they will go to the recipient country to ensure that whether they have taken the right structural measures or not and are using the financial assistance effectively. So I hope now you understand what the news is all about. So we are going to discuss the different terms that are mentioned in the different articles in the upcoming slides, such as this standby arrangement. So you should know that this $3 billion has been taken as a part of standby arrangement. We are going to cover it very soon in a detailed manner. So I hope this is clear to you. Now moving on to the relevance of this topic as far as the syllabus is concerned. So when we see the RBI Grade B syllabus, the topic IMF has been mentioned very precisely, and the same case with NABARD Grade A syllabus also. You can see IMF has been mentioned very specifically, and this topic is very important for your exam. Though the news is not important, nobody is going to ask you about the Pakistan. There will be no direct question regarding it, but the background or the backward and the forward linkages that this news connects to, they are important, and that is the IMF, and we are going to cover it in a detailed manner. So if you are somebody who is new to our Perspective 360 degree initiative, then let me tell you that here we give you an expected question, and we are going to discuss this expected question in this session. And once this session is done, you have to write the answer of this same expected question in the comment box. That will be evaluated by our team within 48 hours. And let me also add that this whole initiative is free of cost. So I hope this point is clear to you. Now let us see the expected question for today, which is what is the contemporary significance of the IMF in, you have to write in also, I missed the in the global economic landscape. So the first step that we have to do for answer writing, as we usually do in all our videos, is identifying the keywords. What are the keywords? The first keyword is the contemporary significance. Contemporary means the present significance. And the next keyword is regarding the global economic landscape. So it is the first keyword, and the second keyword is global economic landscape. because the question is not asking about a specific country such as India or any other dimension. The question is very clear that it is asking about the overall global economic landscape. So our answer should be with respect to that only, global economic landscape. So these are the two keywords that you have to identify before answering the question. Now let us go through the blueprint which you have to follow while answering this question in the comment box and also in your exam. So you have to divide your answer into introduction, body, and the conclusion. The introduction should be around 10 to 12% of the total word limit, and the same rule applies to the conclusion also. The rest of the word limit should be allocated to the body, which has to be written in the form of different headings and subheadings. Now in this question, because the question is only asking about the significance, so there will be one heading only, and under it, under this one heading, there will be different subheadings, and then under different subheadings you have to write your relevant point. And as I always say, that you have to substantiate these points with the help of some relevant data, facts, or examples in order to gain some competitive edge. And we are going to discuss many examples and data in this session regarding the IMF. So now let us move on to the introduction of the question, how we are going to write the introduction. But before jumping directly to introduction, let us first start what is IMF, and we are going to see a brief history of IMF. So let me open the white screen in order to make you understand it in detail. So the story starts during the end phase of Second World War. So as we know that the World War lasted from 1939 about 1945, and as an outcome of World War, there were devastating consequences due to which many economies got ruined, and there was a need to rebuild and stabilize the global economy. So what different countries did in order to reach a certain conclusion, a conference was held in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is in USA, and this conference was Bretton Woods Conference. Now this conference happened from July 1st to July 22nd, 1944. So the aim of this conference was to regulate global financial order in the post World War II period. Now that was the main aim of this conference. And after the different discussions and the dialogues between the different countries, three outcomes were brought on the table. So what were those three outcomes? So the first outcome was regarding reconstruction and development. Now, what does it signify? Reconstruction and development objective means the devastating impact that the World War II had on different economies, and mainly the poor and vulnerable economies. So, this objective was in order to make those economies uplift from the poverty. So, the poverty alleviation was one of the important objective, which was the first outcome of this conference. So, that objective led to the formation of International Bank of Reconstruction and Development in the year 1945, which later on was named as World Bank Group. Now don't confuse World Bank Group with the World Bank, though World Bank is a part of World Bank Group, but when we talk about World Bank Group, it consists of group of 5 banks. And what are those 5 banks? We are not going to get into detail because this video is regarding the IMF. So otherwise the video will become very lengthy. But just understand that the World Bank Group is also an outcome of Bretton Woods Conference. Now the second major objective was to identify balance of payment crisis and solve them. Now, in order to meet this objective, the International Monetary Fund was formed, which is IMF. Now, another third objective was to increase the international trade among the countries. In order to meet this objective, different dialogues happened between the countries, and International Trade Organization was proposed by United States. Remember that it was just proposed, and this proposal was rejected. So International Trade Organization was not made, and later on GATT, which is General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, this law was passed that later on, at the later phase of time, led to the establishment of World Trade Organization. Though there are different treaties such as Uruguay Round and all those things are involved in it, but we are not going to get into details. Just remember that the WTO also has some roots in the Bretton Woods Conference. But our objective is to discuss regarding the IMF. So this is the history regarding how the IMF was formed, how the Second World War brought the circumstances which eventually led to the establishment of International Monetary Fund, which is IMF, and its main aim was to identify the balance of payment crisis in different countries and to solve them with the help of different aids and giving the technical assistance to those countries. We are going to understand in detail how the IMF works. So this is the background detail regarding the IMF. Now let us see the definition of IMF. So IMF was founded in 1944 through the Bretton Woods Agreement and stands as a cornerstone institution dedicated to ensure stability within the international monetary system. I hope this is clear. Now there are different objectives of the IMF, such as to promote international monetary cooperation. Then it facilitates expansion and balanced growth of international trade. It also assists in the establishment of multilateral system of payments. For example, IMF helped European nations to establish European monetary system. That is an example of that. Then another objective is to assist member countries to overcome balance of payment problems. So for example, in case of India, during the 1991 reforms, IMF played an important and significant role. So these are the objectives, and we are going to discuss these objectives in detail. That's why I'm just highlighting it at this point of time. Now moving on to the working of IMF. How does the IMF works? So when we talk about the working of IMF, it plays three important roles. The first role is regarding the surveillance. The second role is regarding the lending, and the third role is regarding the technical assistance. Now surveillance means nothing but, as we have already discussed, what IMF does, it analyzes the situations and the growth patterns of different countries, how their economies are working, and they will identify the balance of payment crisis in those countries. Balance of payment crisis is nothing but to analyze the assets and liabilities transactions in those countries, and what it will do, it will prepare different reports on them. So you must have heard different reports by IMF, such as Global Financial Stability Report, World Economic Outlook, etc. So such reports are prepared by IMF as a part of its surveillance role. Now the next is the lending. Now when it comes to this role of IMF, IMF provides two types of lendings. The first is the concessional lending, and the second is the non-concessional lending. So what is concessional lending? Here the rate of interest is very low, or a lot of times it is zero for the poor and vulnerable countries. And non-concessional lending can be of different types, such as standing by arrangement, flexible credit line, etc. We are going to do it in detailed manner. So this is the lending uh, purpose or the working of IMF, which is in the form of concessional lending and the non-concessional lending. Third is the technical assistance. So how does IMF performs technical assistance? By sending its experts in the different countries, and these expert teams, what they will do, they will help the countries in order to design their policies or the economic policies related to, such as the taxation, the monetary policy, or the fiscal policy, etc. So that is regarding the technical assistance role of the IMF. So this is how the IMF works as far as the broader perspective is concerned. Now let us go through the slide. I've already explained you the surveillance in which the IMF reviews economic policies of member countries and assesses risks and advises on the needed policy adjustments through their reports and different expertise. And then the lending, in which the IMF provides loan to member countries, and then the technical assistance, where the IMF provide technical assistance like training to officials related to banking, finance, balance of payment, etc. So this is how the IMF works and are the major functions of IMF. Now let us talk about the IMF facilities. Under this, we are going to see the different loan instruments that are tailored to provide the specific circumstances of its diverse members. So, what type of loans the IMF provides? So the first one is the concessional lending that we have already seen, that bear no interest rate or the low interest rate. The second is the non-concessional lending. The non-concessional lending can be of different types. The first one is the rapid financing instrument. So it is given to those, the loan is given to those countries who are facing very urgent balance of payment needs, and these loans are usually flexible or less stringent. So this is what the rapid financing instruments are. The second is the standby arrangement. This is the same arrangement under which the Pakistan has been given $3 billion. So this is the arrangement that was there in the news. If I take you back to the news article, here you can see very clearly we were talking about the standby arrangement. So this standby arrangement is a type of financial instrument under the IMF. So standby arrangement is nothing but, under the standby arrangement, the IMF support the countries that are facing balance of payment problems that stem from short-term vulnerabilities. So this means assistance is given to those who are facing the short-term vulnerabilities, and this loan is also given for short-term only. I'm not confirmed, but I think in case of Pakistan, it has been given for 9 months. Though I'm not sure that if Pakistan would able to uh, repay this amount of loan back to IMF within 9 months, I think it would get extended. But as far as the news articles are concerned, at many places I've read that this is for 9 months. Anyways, I hope you got the idea about the standby arrangement. The next is the flexible credit line. So it is given to those countries who have the strong economic fundamentals. For example, the United States. So this is about the flexible credit line. The next is the precautionary and liquidity line. So it is meant for strong economies who don't fit under flexible credit line. For example, the China. The next is the extended fund facility, under which the members are asked to undergo through the structural reforms in order to take the loan, and these loans are given for very long term, and that's why they are named extended fund facility. So I hope these facilities or these types are clear to you. Now let us talk about the IMF quotas. So let me take you back to the white screen. So when we talk about IMF, each member is assigned a different quota. Now, what is quota and what is the significance of this quota and how the quota for different members is decided, we are going to see that. So when we talk about IMF, we have to understand that whenever a country joins the IMF, whenever a new member is added to IMF, then what that member has to do is they have to do some financial contribution to the IMF, to the IMF resources. And how much financial contribution that member has to do, it will depend on its quota, and how that quota is decided, and what is the percentage or the what is the amount of financial resources that that member has to contribute. That depends on the four factors. So the quota allocation depends on four factors. The first factor is the GDP of that country. The second factor is the openness of that economy. Openness means with respect to export and import. The third factor is regarding the variability. Variability means regarding the current account and the capital account, the fluctuations that happened in the current account and the capital account of that country. And the fourth is the forex reserves of that certain country. Now, if the country has higher quota, then it will have to contribute higher financial resources, and if the country has lower quota, then it will have to contribute the lower resources. And this quota determines three things. We are going to understand what is the significance of this quota, but let us first draw this diagram. So on the basis of these four factors, a certain quota is allocated to a country. Now this quota determines three things. The first thing is, as I've already said, the maximum contribution by a member to IMF. Now, how this contribution is made? This contribution is made in two forms. The 75% of the contribution is made in the form of its can be made in the form of its national currency, and the 25% of the quota contribution has to be done in the form of SDRs. So what is SDR? SDR is nothing but these are the, it stands for special drawing rights, and it is nothing but the basket of currencies. So SDR itself is not a currency, it is a basket of currencies, and which currencies are included in under SDR. So there are five currencies which are dollar, Chinese renminbi, Japanese yen, then pound, pound sterling, and the euro. And these currencies have been assigned different weightage and the values under SDR, on the basis of which the SDR's values is determined. So that's how the different countries or the different members, while joining, they have to contribute certain amount of currencies or the contribution as a part of their quota. And this quota determines how much the maximum contribution a country can make depending on these four factors. Now the second thing that is determined through quota is the voting rights. If a country has higher quota, if he has given more financial resources to the IMF, then that country has more voting rights. So when we talk about voting rights, the voting rights can be divided into the basic voting rights and the additional voting rights. So basic voting rights are same for all the countries, whereas the additional voting rights, they depend on the quota contribution. So if a country has more quota, then they are going to have more additional voting rights, and depending on that, they are going to have more control over the voting. The third thing is regarding the access to financing, which is also determined by the quota. So how the access to financing is determined by the quota? Access to financing means the borrowing power. So the if the country has contributed or have made more contribution, financial contribution to the IMF, because it has higher quota because of these four factors, then what will happen? This will also determine its borrowing power. It means that country will be able to borrow more money as compared to the other country that has the lower quota. So that is the significance of quota as far as the IMF is concerned. So now let us read it through the slides, that each member is assigned a quota depending on its country's GDP, openness, economic variability, and international reserves. Now, the role of quota is it decides maximum contribution by a member to IMF resources, then the voting power, which is basic votes and the additional votes, and then the access to financing. I hope this is clear to you. Now, let us also go through the SDRs, which we have already discussed. So, SDRs is an international reserve asset created by IMF in to supplement its member countries' official reserves, and we have already discussed that it is a basket of currencies containing five currencies in fixed proportion, and we have seen how why SDR is not itself is a currency, but it contains five different currencies in its basket, and its value is determined by these currencies only. So here you can see that, such as the dollar has a certain weight, the euro has a certain weight, and these weights and these currencies are reviewed after every 5 years. So the criteria for selecting these currencies, that it should be among the top five exporters and should be widely used for payments. And that is why rupee is not a part of this currency, because we are not among the top export nations. We usually struggle to manage our current account deficit. So that is why rupee is not a part of it. And these five currencies are a part of these special drawing rights. And I hope this is clear to you. Now let us understand what a reverse tranche. So as I told you about the quota, that each member nation has a different quota. So reverse tranche position is that part of the quota that a country can access or borrow from IMF on its own discretion. So if a certain country or a member will access or borrow this amount of quota from the IMF, then there will be no interest rate charged by the IMF. Apart from that, let's say this is 25%. If they are accessing rest of the part of the quota or they are borrowing rest of the money, then they will be charged the interest rate from IMF. So that is the significance of reserve tranche position. So let us read it, that it is a segment of IMF member quota that is accessible without fees or economic reform conditions, and it can be accessed by the member nation anytime on its discretion. And if amount being sought by a member exceeds his reserve tranche position, then it becomes a credit tranche that must be repaid in 3 years with interest. I hope this is clear to you. Now let us go through the next part, which is the body part of the answer, and the question directly asks about the contemporary significance of the IMF. So let us go through the points one by one. So the first point is regarding the financial assistance, and we know that this is the primary or the core objective of the IMF, that is to help the countries that are facing balance of payment crisis and to solve them through financial assistance. And here I have written the example of Egypt, where the IMF disbursed amount of $2.7 during the COVID-19 pandemic. So first thing is that while writing it in your answer, you don't have to mention Egypt. There is no need of that, and you also don't have to mention this $2.7. What you have to write it that IMF played important role during the COVID-19 period by giving financial assistance to different countries. You can quote it as an example, and this is the explanation that we have already discussed, and that is it about the first point. Now the second point is regarding the surveillance. This also we have already discussed in a detailed manner, where the IMF surveillance function involves going through the balance of payment crisis, what is the reason behind them, and then IMF prepares different reports on the basis of them. So the different reports such as the World Economic Outlook and etc. So IMF conducts regular economic surveillance of its member countries, and it's monitor their economic status and then identify the vulnerabilities that later on help them to promote macroeconomic stability and sustainable growth. So that is the another significance with respect to IMF. The third point is regarding the policy advice. So IMF keeps on giving policy advice to its member nations regarding the areas such as the exchange rate policies and the structural reforms and the financial sector regulation, because IMF had different experts as a part of its area. So it keeps on giving the policy advice. You must have heard that in news. We a lot of times we see that IMF talks so and so about India, and then India responds that yes, if that is the case, do we agree with it or not? So such statements and such dialogues keep on happening through IMF, and that is a major significance. That is the policy advice. So the next or the fourth point is the technical assistance or the capacity building. So that is also a major role of IMF, where IMF strengthen the economic institutes and improve the policy formulation of its member nations, and it helps it in areas such as the tax policy, then public financial management, etc. So one such example that I have written is the South Asia Regional Training and Technical Assistance Center that was created with the help of IMF, and it was formed with the collaboration between IMF and the nations like Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. So this you can write it as a part of a example. So you don't have to mention all these nations, otherwise the point will become too lengthy. What you can do is you can write this explanation part, and then you can write the name of this center that was established with the help of IMF assistance or the technical assistance, and can be a good example of that. So I hope you got the point. The next is regarding the crisis prevention and solution. So IMF's important role is regarding the crisis prevention, such as we have already seen the example of the COVID-19, and also during the economic depression, the institutes like IMF become very important, where they help country to stabilize their economy and restore their financial stability and facilitate the recovery. Now, the sixth or the fifth point is regarding the global economic coordination. So, IMF also plays important role with respect to the economic coordination when we talk about certain events. For example, the recent G20 summit that happened in India. So, you can see the video on the YouTube also. I pasted the screenshot. She is the managing director of IMF, Mrs. Kristalina. So, she came to India. So you can go through this explanation. Like, IMF serves as a platform for international economic cooperation and coordination, bringing together policymakers from member nations to discuss global economic issues and exchange views and experiences and coordinate policies to shared challenge. This coordination helps in global economic stability, growth, and prosperity. You don't have to write such a lengthy point, otherwise you will cross the word limit. I've written it just for your reference. You can just cherry pick the important keywords and whatever you feel can make your answer more organized, well structured. So I hope this point is clear to you. The next is the research and analysis. So we have already seen the different reports of IMF, such as the World Economic Outlook, then Global Financial Stability Report. Then there is also a report by IMF, which is Fiscal Monitor Report, then Regional Economic Report. You don't have to name all these reports in your answer. I'm just giving it for your reference or knowledge. What you can do is you can just write that IMF plays very important role in research and analysis through various reports, studies, and data that contribute to understanding and addressing key global economic challenges. And then you can write how these World Economic Outlook and Global Financial Stability Report, they promote evidence-based policy making. You can write it in one line and just finish your point. So I hope this is clear to you. Now, let us move on to the next part, which is the conclusion of the answer. So, as I always say, that there are three key areas which you have to consider while writing your conclusion. The first is a stand, where you have to show your agreement or disagreement regarding a certain uh, issue that has been asked in the question. The second is, why do you take that stand? And the third is, what is the way forward? And if that question is asking about India specifically, then you can mention a line about India. These are the four things that you have to keep in mind while writing your conclusion. So first we will take the stand. What is the stand? What is our stand with respect to IMF? So IMF stands as a pivotal institute in the contemporary global economic landscape, and that is what was asked in the question. What we have written, that yes, IMF stands as a pivotal institute. It has a certain significance in the global economic landscape. Now, why do we take that stand? Why we think so? We have to mention it in our second line. So we have covered the first thing, which is a stand. Now let us go through why. So through its various functions, such as providing financial assistance, offering technical expertise, facilitating crisis prevention and resolution, the IMF plays a crucial role in helping countries to navigate economic challenges and foster sustainable growth. So that is why we think IMF is a pivotal institution, and we have justified our stand. Now, what next? What is the way forward? So the third is regarding the way forward, where we can write what IMF should do for the future approach. So IMF should prioritize reforms for inclusivity, sustainability, and resilience in economic policies. By enhancing transparency and accountability, IMF can better address the evolving needs of member countries. So this is what you can write as a way forward, that IMF should focus on inclusivity, sustainability, and resilience to make future to become a better institute as far as the global economic landscape is concerned. Then the next point was about India, but since the question is not asking about India, that you can avoid this point. Otherwise, if you want to write it, then you can write like India should engage more with IMF and should have dialogue with IMF to its expertise and technical advice on its policy making in order to become a global superpower uh, in the next 5 years or in the next 10 years, whatever it is. So you can write something like that. But the question is not directly asking about India. That's why I have avoided this point. Otherwise, you can. This is a very nice and a systematic way in order to structure your conclusion. I hope you got the point. So that is it for today. And don't forget to write your answer in the comment section. That will be evaluated by our team within 48 hours. So I hope this is clear to you, and thank you so much and all the best.